What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This week we're back on the Travelall, and this is going to be the last episode of the Travelall. I put it up for sale. A guy over in Texas really wanted it, but he wanted to trade me. I was trying to get rid of a truck, and what do you know, I ended up with another truck. We got one more upgrade to do to the Travelall before we get this thing loaded up. It's time to take out that problematic T56. Man, we've been having issues with this thing. Clutch, bearings, all kinds of stuff. We can't really get this thing to work correctly. So here we got a brand new 6L80. So we're throwing a brand new 6L80 in this automatic transmission. This thing will be a little bit more of a cruiser. Right now we're getting ready to take out our drive shaft, the transmission. We're gonna get the new transmission installed today. We're gonna have to take a measurement for a new drive shaft. We're also gonna probably have to fabricate a new transmission cross member. We're gonna have to order a new shifter, a couple things to get this thing to go back down the road, but all in all, I think it's gonna be a good improvement. Although, I am kind of sad that we had to take out my handmade shifter. So we'll probably keep this thing around the shop. I'm sure we'll be able to use it on something else one day. I really like this thing. Or maybe I'll sell it, I don't know. If anybody needs a really one-off custom shift lever, let us know. All right, we got our clutch assembly out. We got our old transmission out, the T56 sitting over there. Now we have our flywheel already installed, and we're getting ready to throw this bad boy up in there. We are gonna have to add a transmission cooler, so that's one more part we're gonna need to get before we get this thing back on the ground and running around town. We got our new transmission put in. We got our angles looking pretty good going from our output shaft over to our rear end. We had to make a little adjustment with our exhaust. On this side, we had to bring it up a little bit because it's hitting our cross member. So we're trying to utilize this existing cross member that we've already fabricated, but we're either gonna have to modify or remake this little extension that we had made. Our center from our mounting points are about 1.5 inches off, and we have just about a 1/2 inch gap between our bottom plate here and our bracket. So this is gonna have to come back off. We'll clean that up, get something welded onto that. We're also gonna have a little issue over here. As you see right there, those two red plugs, caps, are our coolant lines for our transmission. So they're very close to our exhaust right here. So we may have to modify this exhaust, or hopefully maybe find some fittings that will get to work there, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But we're off to a good start. Now we're also able to get a measurement on our drive shaft and get that thing going. This used to live up there like this. This was the top of our mount, this was the bottom. So now I'm gonna flip it over, and I have enough meat here to re-drill my holes at the edge of this bracket to catch our new mount. However, we still have a gap between the new height of the transmission and our mount, which is just under a 1/2 inch. So I have two pieces of steel here. I just checked it and it's perfect. So these are gonna act as shims. So instead of just sliding them in there and letting them float around, I'm gonna go ahead and weld this to our bracket, and we'll drill some new holes through it. And this will be a perfect new transmission mount. Might not look beautiful, but it's gonna work. That's what's important. We got our driver's side exhaust completely dismantled. We already took the header off. We cut the 90, which is now over here, off of our header. We're using some Vibrant pie cuts. So our goal here was to 90 up quicker so we could try to avoid these two fittings that are coming out of our transmission for our cooler lines. So at this point we got a bunch of stuff kind of taped together. So we're 90ing up, swooping up over the top of our fittings here. And then we got some more pie cuts, which we're gonna be starting to make our transition back down to meet up with our 3-inch exhaust over here. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and get some tacks on all this stuff. We'll tack it back up to our header. We need to kind of get our exhaust back into space where it needs to be, and then we'll figure out the rest of our connection. But the goal to scoop up and away from these two fittings, we have achieved. All right, we got all of our pie cuts all welded back together. Everything should be good to go. Right now, we're gonna go ahead and get the headers back into the truck so we can find out where we're gonna land our new O2 sensor bung. The old one is way too far away now. I believe ideally you want it about 8 to 10 inches from the collector. And as you see now, it's probably closer to almost 2 foot away. So we're gonna be plugging this one up, and then we're gonna be putting a new one in. All right, we got our exhaust modified. Everything's back in. We have our transmission in, obviously. Next step is adding our transmission cooler. So a funny thing is we already had a transmission cooler in here, and then we didn't need it anymore because we went from TR6060 to the T56. So we took the transmission cooler out. That actually went into Brock's truck. And here we are putting it back in. So we have a little transmission cooler here from Jegs. Came with some fittings, some hose. This is certainly not enough, but we're gonna try to put the transmission cooler back where it was, which was in between our radiator and our condenser. So Romeo is gonna go ahead and try to slide this condenser out without taking the fittings off, so we don't have to recharge the system. This thing's pretty small. In order to get this mounted to our top of our core support, we'd have to take the radiator out. I don't feel like doing that. So our thought is to zipping it right through our condenser and using this foam to keep a nice air gap between the two. So we'll go ahead and stick this foam right onto our cooler and then zip it right through onto our condenser and tighten it up. And we should have about 3/4 to an inch of air gap. That's gonna be our best and easiest method to get it done, right? That means yes. So before we get this installed, we're gonna go ahead and get our hose onto the condenser end. That way, when we do get it in, we're not gonna have an issue getting to our line. So we'll just pass our lines down in between the radiator and our core support down here, and then we could finish running them to the transmission. All right, moving right along here. The automatic transmission is going to require a transmission control computer thingamabob. TCU, we're gonna call it. Got a harness. So now we're just gonna have to feed this harness through our firewall. I think we're gonna pick alongside of our bulkhead from Restomod AC. So we'll come out the firewall here. This side down here, down yonder, it's gonna go to our transmission right here. We'll be able to just kind of keep these wires nice and tight. Go up close to the transmission, avoiding our exhaust. Back up through here, in, and then we're gonna have to mount our actual TCU maybe in the glove compartment. So let's get it done.
Romeo and Mike have got our transmission installed, the exhaust changed, all the mechanical portions of it ready to go. So next thing we have to do is get everything wired in and then calibrated so we can start driving it. So what we have here is a Powertrain Control Solutions transmission control unit. So this is used for 6L90 transmission in a standalone mode. We have a handful of outputs and inputs, as well as our power and grounds here. We have to integrate the throttle position signal going into our Holley Dominator ECU into this ECU. So we're gonna have to use these couple wires here to tie into our 5-volt reference and our signal. Here we have a bunch of outputs for our reverse lights and the brake input, you know, a bunch of stuff like that. There's also a handful of other digital inputs. So let's just get this thing wired in. Finish off a bunch of the wiring for the basic controls of the transmission controller. You saw me do the powers, the grounds to get the thing powered up, and then I had to add a couple inputs from our brake pedal so that our torque converter clutch knows when to lock and unlock when you apply the brakes. Got an RPM signal to it, as well as our throttle position sensor signal. So now the next thing I'm going to do is move on to our shifting. We purchased a Lokar sport style shifter, so it's got tap shift. When you want to change gears, you can up and down. Luckily, with our computer controlled 6L80 transmission, we have the option. They came stock with tap shift. So with all the inputs and outputs completely wired, as well as the power and grounds to get the unit running, I'm going to move on to wiring our shift controls. All right, here we go. Travelall is just about wrapped up. Last piece we were waiting on to get this automatic drivetrain installed in the vehicle was our drive shaft. We'll go ahead and get this in there, make sure it fits properly, and then we should be done with our transformation from our manual transmission to automatic transmission. Next thing we're gonna be doing is going on a test drive. We went back and checked all the paperwork. Our drive shaft manufacturer had made a small mistake and gave us the wrong slip yoke. So they overnighted us a brand new one. It's the proper one for our transmission now. And also, there was a mistake on the differential yoke side. So we had to change the U-joint from a 1350 to a 1330. So that was wrong too. I didn't even realize that because I had just stopped when the slip yoke was wrong. So we got a new U-joint here. So I'm gonna swap that guy out. Then we'll finally be able to get this thing in there, get it on the road, make sure that the transmission is shifting properly. All right, we've got the drive shaft installed. Now it's time to test drive this. We're running real good now, shifting properly. So this is 6L80 transmission, 6-speed automatic, 2 overdrive gears, 1500 RPM, 45 miles an hour. I said it before to everybody in the shop, and I'll say it again now. This vehicle always deserved to have an automatic transmission. It feels so much better with automatic. There's just too much to handle with a manual transmission. Being able to have both hands on the wheel all the time feels real good. I'm gonna miss this Travelall, which is kind of ironic because I really didn't like it, but now that it's got an auto, I kind of like it. Kind of like it. Not really like it. Kind of like it.
All right, while Andrew's test driving the Travelall, we're gonna pop outside because our trade-up truck just pulled up. Old red 19, I think it's a 72. This one came from Texas. As everybody probably knows, I have a lot of trucks and I decided to get rid of one. So I kind of put a couple up on Facebook Marketplace, and the Travelall was the one that a lot of people wanted more than anything else. So a guy from Texas hit me up and he said, you know what, Mike, I really want the Travelall. What I gotta do to get it? I wanted some cash, I wanted some money to get rid of a truck, but he wanted to get rid of one truck too. So here we got a 1970 C10 short bed. It's kind of coincidental because no, we have 3 1970 C10s in our shop. This thing is super clean, man. It's cleaner than most anything that comes into our shop that I drive. It is red, not my favorite color, but interior is clean. It's got a radio, it's got blows cold AC, the dash works. I mean, obviously, looking at the truck, it is sitting on some 20s, but something that it's missing that most all salvage vehicles have is some kind of like suspension. It's a stock suspension. It does have disc brakes up front. The motor is nice and clean, man. I'll tell you what, I believe he's done a little work to it. It is a small block. I think he's done like a cam, intake, some heads, a long tube exhaust. It's a solid truck, man. So I'm kind of thinking to throw the trim package on it like it would have come from the factory, maybe even with a two-tone, a white and red or a black stripe, maybe put some Detroit steels on it. And you know I'm thinking about slamming this thing. I already looked on the QA1 website. They got a full bolt-on kit for it. So that's an option. You know, the other option is throw it on some bags, man. We could bag it just like the Travelall. I mean, we took the Travelall about as far as we could go with this thing, man. The interior is sweet. It's obviously LS swap. So we traded up an old, rusty, rugged station wagon for a bright red, clean pickup truck and some cash. You know, our plan was to let this thing go with a big burnout, but after doing all that work to the transmission and the truck's not mine anymore, I feel like it's probably not a good idea. So in lieu of that, I think we're gonna go ahead and just do a nice smoky red burnout in the new red truck. All right, guys, well, that's a wrap on the episode. That's also a wrap on the Travelall. We got to get this thing loaded up, sending it to my boy JR in Texas. But let us know what you guys think we should do with the red C10, man. Should maybe I just sell it, or should we do some work to it? I think we're gonna do some work to it. What do you think, Andrew?
I think so too. I need some upgrades. It's a little bit dated. Let's make it cool before we get rid of it, you know?
It definitely burns some rubber.
Yeah.
But all right, guys, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for subscribing. We'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.
Later.
It just dawned on Andrew and I that we've been rolling around with this Travelall for almost a year with a paddleboard on it, and we've yet to go to the beach and go paddleboarding. So Andrew and I are gonna strap on our swimmies. We're gonna take our paddleboards out tomorrow. We're gonna go on a beach cruise.